Trigger warning. Some people may find topics discussed in this episode difficult. Please proceed with caution.
The Frankie Files.
If you would like information on cults in the news, please join my new Substack, frankietees.substack.com. The Frankie Files podcast is researched, written, recorded, and edited by me, Frankie Tees. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 21 of the Frankie Files. My guest today was a writer at City Pages in Minneapolis for over 13 years. His 2019 feature, The Legend of Genghis Muskok, led to the discovery of the cult in Alaska that inspired the creation of his website. He loves working with other writers and watching old episodes of Dateline. Syran Warner is a 30-something journalist who was investigating a religious cult which started in Alaska called The Body. He painstakingly interviewed and videoed members of the cult and regular citizens to get the truth of what is going on for several years, a true crime story. And it is ongoing. There are two websites, one with several cult reports and one just on The Body cult. There are thebodyintl.com and cultstories.com. He is also on TikTok, Reddit, and Twitter as Syran Warner. Syran is spelled S-Y-R-A-N. Warner got a break after over 7 years or more of research and postings online to his website, thebodyintl.com, when on his TikTok post about the Body cult was picked up by Newsweek May 19, 2022. A video of one of the members being arrested, which he posted on the channel, went viral with 200,000 views and thousands of concerned comments because the video showed a member calling his child property based on the view of sovereign citizenship. The exposure has been a long time coming for Warner, who had an interest to help the children who may be experiencing family separation and sexual abuse. Warner appeared on the popular podcast Cultbot Podcast, hosted by Casey out of the UK, recently, and I recommend that you find that after listening to this episode to complete the story. It's a long-form podcast, and they really get into the details of this case, as well as the case that led him to discover the body. Warner is truly an activist on grassroots level, using his own budget to put together the story on a group who maintains a ghostly public image and has moved from Alaska to Washington and Australia to date. I met Syran on Reddit, April of 2022, in the Reddit r Cults forum, in a brief exchange. It's great for me to meet someone who cares about us cult kids. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce him to you, my listeners, today. I'd like to introduce you to Syran Warner. How are you, Syran?
I'm doing great. Happy to be on your show.
Oh, there's so much to unpack here. I did my due diligence with notes. You worked at a Minnesota brick and mortar weekly before they died, huh?
Yeah, I was there for just about 13 years.
Okay.
In some kind of capacity, but that's where like all my real experience came from.
Yeah. You went up through the ranks.
Yeah. I started selling classifieds there and ended up with cover stories by the end.
Nice. And Genghis Muskok's murder in Alaska led you to the cult. Stumbling on that cult, obviously, I bet you didn't expect all of that to fundamentally change your life.
No, I mean, that story sort of like became my world after working on it it was just something that I followed for a long time before I really like knew about the cult. I'd been in conversation unknowingly with these people, but kind of like an obsession, and then it just like became like, oh, this is just like something I do now. Like this the story goes until it's over.
So, Syran, let's get right into Newsweek. You're the source on an article about the Body cult on a Newsweek story, May of 2022. How glad were you to see the story you worked on so hard and so long a story that you broke as a Newsweek story. I'd like to hear about that and where you got the police video that made headlines.
It was kind of cool. It's kind of the Newsweek story was cool, but it's sort of like soft journalism, I guess. It was cool to get that kind of exposure, but there's a lot sort of cooking. I've been talking to journalists since before that video ever came out, before that sort of blew up on TikTok. With the Newsweek article, it was exciting to see it in such a big venue, but it was kind of like soft journalism, and it was something that I was working with other journalists on the story. And I got more excited yesterday when I saw somebody making a YouTuber making a video about the body than a journalism story. I think the internet is just such a crucial part of how this ever came out. But yeah, it was exciting. I mean, it was really exciting for my parents who have known that I've been on this journey to see it in Newsweek, I guess, maybe more than...
Yes, it's an endorsement.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I cool. See, but that's a new development. So you got people thinking and looking and occupying the cult. That is fabulous. What about that video? How'd you obtain it?
Through anything else. I mean, a lot of this story comes through court records.
Right.
From the very beginning, I had some court records when I first really the story of the body kind of solidified in my mind that it was a real thing. And a journalist sent me some court audio of these divorce cases that sort of unspooled the story in this tiny community in Alaska. And those court documents are super informative. There's still some the most important stuff that is out there just because of the timing and everything that was going on in 2014 and 2015. It was this great schism in the church. And so all those court documents are super important. I knew how to file for court documents, and in the police reports, because I pulled the police reports immediately after I found out these guys were arrested and the kids were rescued. The very first thing I did the next day was pull the police reports. And in those reports, it states, the cops are all wearing body cams.
Yeah.
And so I knew that footage was out there, and it took a couple weeks to get my hands on it, I think.
Well done.
Maybe a week and a half, something like that.
Yeah.
But I've gotten a few records now from Tonasket that are on video.
Well, and for those who are listening who might not yet be exposed to any more of this story, I'll add that the week of the Newsweek article, May 19th, somewhere around that time, a member of the body was stopped and arrested. I believe it was a routine stop in Tonasket, Washington, where they are now. And he addressed his child in the car as property. And it went viral after you published it.
Yeah, that was really insane. It was so when I actually saw the video and sat down and cut it together, I kind of had an idea that this is going to spread on the internet because it was just so strange.
Yeah, he really revealed how funky their views are, how out there they are.
Yeah, I mean, there was some stuff about him, the member calling his child property in the police report. I think it's referenced once or twice. But then, I mean, he just repeats it so many times.
Yes, he does.
And at the end, there's a confrontation with the police officer where the police officer gets frustrated with him and is like, "Your daughter is a human being," and it's just such a great moment for that police officer. Amen. He did. I mean, the police. I don't know how they had so much patience with them. There were two people arrested that night, actually. But they did an outstanding job.
Okay. Well, that really pulled the sweater string. Now, how many members does the body have? And we'll get into the location and history a little bit later, but do you know a general count?
I don't know. I mean, something that was interesting and is that there was an article that just came out this week from Washington, where this group is now, from the local paper, and they did it was somewhat of an interview with me. It was mostly like PR for the cult, and the cult got to tell their side of the story. And part of their story was that, we're just 6 people and this guy won't leave us alone. And I just know for a fact that they're just saying people in the police reports, oh, it's just these 6 people, because there are 6 people who are sort of tied to it. That's not the reality. It is not some big cult. I don't know how many members there are exactly, because it's such a secretive thing. But all this has come out, and then I found people online. I was in contact with a member about a month ago who I'd never heard of before, and then they have this sect in Australia, and I know these members. So they say there are only 6 people, and I know exactly who they're talking about, right? It's more like people who've already been exposed.
Okay.
Gotcha. My Instagram handle, my Twitter handle, are some variation of Free Melissa Parker, which is this woman in the cult who is on this ridiculous chapter of her life in the Australian branch, who left behind 6 kids in Alaska. And when I read that, I was like, I wonder what Melissa would think of this. I wonder what she would think of them saying there's only 6 people. I
mean, 6 are her kids. Wow. Okay. So there's a lot of mystery around it. They've kept that up. Tell us about going back to the roots of this group. I'd like to get into the preacher who was the inspiration for the leader of the body cult, Mark B., who you're calling Mark B. Who was his mentor? Is this a religious Christian belief system? And, at what point, I believe you said it was 2003, that he started the cult in Alaska. Am I right? Tell us about this little point of conception.
So this happens in cults sometimes. I mean, there was a cult called The Way from back in the day. Started in Ohio, and that spawned. It was led by this guy Victor Wire-Willie, but he spawned all these other cult leaders who broke off, and that's the case with the body. Where they come from is that there's this guy Randy Schenkel at this church called the Church in Marshall, Texas.
Damn, Texas is always Texas is so involved in inception of cults. I'm shocked as I learn more. It's crazy. Okay, Marshall, Texas. Randy.
Yeah, and this guy Randy is he's different than Mark in a lot of ways. He's much. I mean, I think he's a lot less dangerous, even though he is he is a dangerous guy. It's just not as extreme as what Mark is.
Okay.
And this guy Randy, he came up with this using all this Hebrew and all this old biblical stuff that I think is intentionally designed to confuse people. And Mark uses that same circular stuff too. A lot of the scripture of the body comes from is just inspired by this guy Randy Schenkel. Okay. And the funny thing about Randy that just blew my mind is I was looking into him, and I stumbled upon a YouTube channel, and he's got a ton of these ridiculous YouTube videos where he put some money into the production, and I mean, I think it's like an internet gem that these things exist, and that I don't know what he thinks about it, but obviously he's proud of them or something, or he would stop making these videos. And that's been really entertaining is going through some of these videos of Randy where he's canoeing or down a river, or he's on a 4-wheeler, or they're just ridiculous. This guy has I don't know, he's just a megalomaniac, of course. I mean, that's what
right. Right.
Yeah.
That's what it takes, my friend. But what is the indoctrination that he gave to Mark? Is it the Hebrew mixed with Christianity, Judaism, Christianity?
It's like this. I mean, there's a lot of like things about the body and about Church and Marshall that are like Jewish in nature. Like they celebrate Pentecost, but they don't celebrate like Christmas and Easter.
It's a hybrid.
It's this hybrid that is, I mean, it's always tough to explain that.
I'd like to interject. The cult I was in had like 3 doctrines too. They make a soup and then they present it as, their version. So it's pretty straightforward. I think you're right. They just pick and choose what they want.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com.
Mark writes his own sort of scripture because he has everybody convinced that he's going to be like, the book after, he's going to have his own chapter in the Bible or whatever he believes.
That script that he made, was it called Eloah or something?
Well, there's Eloah. That is it's a word for God.
Okay.
That is like this ancient word for God that comes up in his scripture. A lot of these really strange concepts come up in his writings. And that one was unique because a member had, before I ever saw his documents, there was a member who started a company or a former member who started this company in Pennsylvania, who I was looking into, and the name of the company was Eloah. I was like, well, what is this? And then I looked into it and was like, oh my God, this comes directly from Mark. Like, this is a word that nobody uses. You wouldn't use this unless you knew Mark or Randy Schenkel, or you were like a Bible study. You were studying the Bible at some Christian university or something.
Right. Okay. Got it. Well, the leader, Mark B., basically a descendant from the teachings.
Randy Schenkel.
Randy Schenkel. Okay. So then we've got Mark B. He seems pretty insidious. He's gone about collecting members. And as you mentioned in our pre-chat, their recruiting methods are very, deceptive. He breaks up marriages. He breaks up families. Let's get into this. Let's get into what he has done. So one of the stories I saw in your documentary was that he broke up a marriage so he could obtain the wife that he wanted from another guy. Wow. It's pretty direct and aggressive, huh?
Yeah, I mean, he's broken up multiple families because of wanting access to women. Got it.
Straight up. It's not very Christian, is it?
No, it's the opposite of like family values based in any way.
Yeah. So Mark using the scripture to get his own sexual needs fulfilled, basically.
In this group, like, Mark is Jesus Christ. Like, if you think about like the way people see him, he is a prophet. He's a living prophet who, like, you don't question this guy because this is the word of God to the members, and that's like where his power comes from. Yeah, and why he's able to do this kind of stuff. But yeah, we can talk about the things that he is doing, has done, I guess.
Well, he's a charismatic leader, then.
Yes, absolutely.
Got it. And that's listed as like a type of church, charismatic leader. In my studies, I've been finding out. So, okay, got it. So he convinces them to do things. I'm going to talk about that a little more later. I want to go to next. So we talked about the leader. Now, one of your initial points of contact was with Katie with a C. You were investigating the murder in Alaska, and then you linked up with her as a journalist. Am I right?
Yeah, I linked up with her as a journalist, and she was a source in this story, and that I was working on about the murder of Genghis Muskox. Yeah. And I knew she was doing something not great, something like severely unethical. Okay. and that she was sort of connected to that story. So I followed her. I mean, we just started talking, like any time I could talk to her on the phone. Like, she wanted to talk to me all the time to sort of persuade the direction of the story I was working on. And she told me she had some information that I could only get from her. That was my first sort of exposure to this group.
So odd. So you were drawn in and then started realizing I believe someone else told you, wait, she's in a cult. You know that, right?
Yeah, it was like a month into the story, a month into my contact with Katie. I was running something by a lawyer in Kenai, Alaska, which is right by where this cult started. And I was saying, we were like kind of arguing about something like jurisdiction of this case or something. And I told him, like, well, Katie told me this. And he was like, do you know about the cult she's in? And he told me a little bit about it, but I just didn't believe it. Like, it sounded too strange. Like, I knew she was religious. She talked about God all the time. She talked about this church in the middle of nowhere. Like, it was the same to me as if he would have said, like, she's like training to join the CIA or something. As far as like would have believed the story. Like, I just didn't think, and I guess like I didn't know anything about cults at the time, really. So.
Yeah. It brushed with your life. So when I was listening to your interview on the Cult Ball podcast, one of the things I took away from that exchange with Katie was that you felt an experience of being coerced. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, right away off the bat, when I started listening back to my tapes with Katie, knowing that she was in a cult, I was looking for instances where she talked about the church. Like, that was all I was really looking for, or talked about God, to see if there was anything that would be revealing in there. And it was like, in our very first conversation, there was this thing, like I had been doing like a bunch of research on cults and reading all these stories and talking to psychologists and stuff. And when I went back, like in the very first tape with Katie, she says something. I think I mentioned it briefly earlier, but it's basically like, I have all this information for you. You've been looking for it forever. Like, I'm the person who knows it. You're never going to find this stuff anywhere else. You know, I have the answers. Like, and if I decide I trust, like, I will tell you some of this stuff, basically.
That sounds like recruitment too, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and I just knew, like, I had heard that tape a few times before, but like thinking about it through the sort of like cult lens, it was like, damn, that's pretty culty. like a way to, because that's straight what all like cult leaders do. It's like, I'm not saying she's a cult leader, but she knows the sort of the script at this point is like, I am, it's what Mark does. Like, I am the answer to God. Like, I'm the only true way to God. Like, if you want to know God, you got to know me.
You know, we're indoctrinated. Being a cult survivor, we're indoctrinated. We do have to recruit 24/7. So it's probably on her mind. Maybe she was thinking, this guy sounds like he might be interested, or I could make him interested. Maybe she was really thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, it's bargaining. Like, it got more extreme than that when I started listening to tapes like further down the line. Though the thing that really like blew my mind was, there was a tape where I was talking to Katie and she was asking me all this stuff about my personal life, and I was just kind of like unloading stuff about my personal life. And then like right after that, I was saying something like, you know, I really feel like all this happening right now and meeting you, and this is God. And, you know, and I am not I'm an atheist.
Okay.
And then I just sort of remembered, like, I had this memory of like standing in this yard in Duluth, Minnesota, and watching like the wind blow through the leaves and thinking like, this is God. And I was talking to Katie, was like the only person I was talking to about this, but she had sort of put that in my head, like, you know, like all this stuff that's going on, like it's outside of your control, you know, and it made sense. And I've heard that kind of stuff before. I was raised Catholic, there's a pattern to everything, and there's a path that God is going to send you on. But that was the only time in my life that I really believed that. And then I stopped thinking that when it slowly receded after I stopped talking to Katie.
It was a trick.
Yeah, and it just blew my mind because I never thought that like my experience was in any way like a piece of, I don't know, like I thought this was like I got this amazing source, but I didn't think like it was gonna, like I was gonna be a part of it. And that definitely really changed the calculus of what I wanted to do, and publishing stuff about this cult and bringing them down. Was that it was me and Katie had a personal relationship. We were friends. We talked about all kinds of stuff. There was just really uncomfortable stuff to listen back on in there. That was where it was kind of like, yeah, this is just like something I'm going to do now.
Wow. So it lit a fire. Obviously, a lot of people don't believe in coercion or mind control. So when you have a direct experience, it's like, the mind can be manipulated. It's in all the books. I was telling you the other day, Friedrich Nietzsche quote, "When you look into the abyss looks into you." It really comes to mind. You were getting really close to the heart of what was going on there, and they knew it. So she might have flipped some script on you and really tried to influence you.
It was complicated. And then like once Katie, I mean, a couple of years after that, me and Katie got back in touch. She was out of the cult, and we had a couple conversations sort of going back into this story that Mark, the leader, like knew my girlfriend at the time's name.
Oh, shoot.
From when I was talking to Katie. There was something weird on the internet that I thought like with some troll that was like posting things, and I just had to ask her. I was like, did you ever mention? And she's like, well, yeah, I might have. Yeah, I guess I did. And it was like, well, yeah, you were like, why would you ever mention, like, obviously you're going to talk about like this guy you're talking to in Minnesota who knows all about this story that you're involved with. But like, why would it ever be an important detail like in my personal life?
She was feeding him info.
Yeah, exactly.
That's spooky. Yeah,
it was
I
really
get
spooky.
you. Mm-hmm. No, I know. And a lot of people don't understand this is called cults operate in the gray zone. They literally try to get away with as much as the law will allow. And there's so much allowance for religious and exception for religious in the laws. And of course, that needs to change.
Yeah, it sort of crossing those paths right there, like that sort of collecting of information, like a lot of cults do this. I mean, like, cults are blackmail machines. Former members shunning. I mean, and this is something like getting information on me is like, it's something to sort of control our relationship and the narrative.
Correct.
And that's the reason why I feel like so many survivors of this cult, why this thing existed for 20 years before I started breaking that story. People would be gone from the group and they wouldn't say a word, even if their wife was gone, even if all their money was gone. I mean, everybody leaves penniless, but I mean, these people had like terrible situations they weren't willing to talk about. And I from the few people who have talked, I've really heard about like the fear is placed in you, because one of the things this guy does is have you confess all your sexual sins, even if you don't have. People were making stuff up to please him because you couldn't you had to say something.
Forced confession.
Yeah, and asking people about their sex lives and getting these information on people that, like, I have Mark on tape when he's kicking out one of the members that's like, if you say a word, it's over, like, or if you like speak out against me, like, it's over, and you sort of know what that means. He did threaten people with like death, but he also just threatened people like, you speak out, like everybody's going to know everything about you.
Right. And NXIVM, I'd like to add NXIVM and Scientology are famous for this. NXIVM calls it collateral, and Scientology does it in their clearing sessions, which are all recorded. Incredible, right? What what we give up as cult members is everything, and then later it can be used against us. It's pretty bad. Well done on that.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com.
Let's talk about the property that Mark B. started with ownership, the purchase in Alaska. What is the story of that piece of property? And, through time, so many cults have compounds where they want to separate themselves from society onlooking. And this seems to really follow that playbook.
Yeah, the compound just totally blew my mind. I had no idea what it was like until I stumbled upon a video they had made in 2015 of the land. But I knew they had this piece of land that they built all these like temporary structures on to be like this compound / like work zone for this weird like art they were making. There were like teepees on the land. If you've seen it, it's strange.
And that was narrated by Peter, right?
Yeah, it's narrated by Peter, who now like leads the group in Australia.
Right. Okay.
And he's Katie's dad.
And so the Alaska property was quite large, and then it was also serendipitous that a oil pipeline was going to go through it, so the land value increased and they were able to sell it for a profit.
Yes, a huge profit. And I think from what I've heard from former members who invested in it, like, it was always like a con. Like, everybody in the church donates. We're going to have this space for it'll stay in our name for generations. And it's like, it's this investment, like we could sell parcels of it and just donate like whatever the Lord has in your heart to give. And all these people like donated their savings to this land that went in one person's name.
Yeah.
And then when it was sold, the guy who owned it, his ex-wife got half of it because thank God. It was like they didn't get all the money.
Yeah.
But they ended up getting it sold for millions of dollars. And then there was another member who sold another parcel of land that was like $2 million or something like that, because the pipeline was just buying up everything that was like on these bluffs.
That oil money.
The oil company, I guess.
Such big dollars. So then I want to go to the ex-member you featured on the documentary. People can see that at bodyintl.com. So the man who lost it all, what's his story? It's pretty intriguing.
Yeah, his story is fascinating. It's the first story that I really learned about, because when the cult story was confirmed to me and I knew it was like a real thing, because of this journalist in Alaska who knew just a ton of stuff about this group, and she sent me some recordings that she had made because she was going to do a story 7 years ago.
And that was Russia?
Yes. And
okay.
She had this like 3-hour interview with this guy who, it's like the Rosetta Stone of this story.
Okay.
Because his life is falling apart. Everything in his world is crumbling like at the time of the interview. Like he's speaking out. He's like the only person who's ever gone to a journalist before.
Oh, wow.
He was just willing to put up a fight against this group and just willing to spill everything. He just started talking. He started releasing all these recordings that he had from the church. And the reason, his whole life was on the line. Like, they were trying to take all his kids and paint him as a child molester. So,
no, and that was a marriage that Mark broke up, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
To get his wife?
Yeah, to get access to his wife. I think they kind of wanted I think it was useful to have the kids, or they thought, because they were young and they needed new blood or something like that. So they wanted to have this guy's kids in the group too.